Hi everyone, welcome back to the podcast. My name's Jack.
My name's Joe.
You should have said my name's Joe.
My name's Joe. Who is your daddy? And what are we going to talk about today? Huh?
And what does he do for a living?
Yeah.
Hello everyone. Today we're talking about Predator. And I think both me and Joe are quite excited.
Well, I thought we were just going to talk about Arnold Schwarzenegger, to be honest, but...
Yeah, no, I was tempted to just do the entire discussion in Arnie's voice. But I feel like we should be probably a little bit constructive, I guess.
Yeah, no, I mean...
Predator, yeah. Not Predator 2, not Predators, not The Predator. Predator, the original. Besides the most recent, I think all three of the original entries are really good.
Well, here's the thing. I can't quite remember much. I've seen some of the other Predator films, but I can't remember as much of them.
The Predator franchise has the issue of what do you do as a sequel to Predator? Yeah. It's such a perfect film in what it's trying to capture and do. And it's such a simple formula that you can't really change the formula of it because it's not really got a formula. Like, it hasn't got like a conventional plot. Things kind of just happen, but it's so compelling, and there's all these little, like, bits of details and directing and acting that and special effects and that make it this big, fantastic package. In terms of the actual elements of the story, really all you can do is switch up the setting in which this story takes place. And that's what the first two sequels did. Predator 2 had the very, interesting twist of, like, let's set it still in a really hot place, but we'll do it in LA, because that's really hot, but it's an urban environment, it's an urban jungle. Yeah. And that provides a really interesting sort of, challenge for the Predator and for people hunting him. It's not a perfect film. It's definitely not as good as the original, but I respect it for what it tried to do. And then Predators is just kind of like a soft reboot. That is also a sequel. I think they do address in the film. It's been a while. I've seen Predator 2. I can remember quite clearly because it's quite a simple film. But Predators is simple, but there's a lot. I think there's a lot of like finger pointing. Like, oh, you remember that? You remember the Predator film? But Predators, I think, is actually a much better sequel because it kind of doesn't like fall into the kind of weird stuff that the second film has, where like the Predator's running through people's like living rooms and stuff, and it's all kind of sometimes it becomes a bit goofy. Like Gary Busey's kind of weird in that film as well.
Yeah, I mean,
but in Predators, you have Adrian Brody holding the fort down, and he's doing a great job. He's not a fantastic job, he's being the Arnie of that film, and it works.
To be fair, I need to rewatch the sequels to Predator, but it's been a little while.
But yeah, I mean, until The Predator, though, like, Predator 2, I think, has a muted respect, like, sort of, a muted reaction just because it is the same thing, but in the city, and as well, it wasn't John McTiernan, I don't think, who did... I mean, I think he literally just did the first Predator, and that's it. But yeah, I mean, but Predators, I think, is one that unfortunately was... Because it has that sort of remake quality to it, I think a lot of people forgot about it, unfortunately. Because it's definitely... Here's the thing, is that none of these films are as good as Predator, but Predators is probably the closest to being as good. It's definitely getting there. And it has like a unique sort of twist on the formula where it's like, okay, all of these people are like specialists, they're the best sort of like, mercenaries in their work. They are the human equivalent of like the best predators, basically. Yeah. And not all of them are like mercenaries. Some of them are people just like some of them are gangsters and Yakuza and stuff. But they're all put into this survival situation, and it's got that great twist of like they're not on Earth this time. They're on an alien planet, and that adds to the confusion of trying to survive. I mean, he also introduced inter-predator conflicts, which was a fun enough gimmick for that film. I think the way they took it with The Predator, again, that entire film is just terrible, so there's no point even bringing it up, really, beyond addressing that it exists. But yeah, I guess... I know I went on a bit of a tangent about the sequels. I just wanted to... Because you said you were a bit unfamiliar with them, I wanted to try and familiarise you with them again.
one thing is for sure, that the first Predator film is the most well-known one.
I mean, I know last time we were talking about Mad Max possibly becoming a classic. I think, well, it's not even just that. I think Predator is a classic. It's an action classic. It's obviously, we're not talking about like Casablanca here, but we're talking about Predator, which, again, like you were talking about with like Alien and Aliens to Terminator, these films were these are the ones that have stood the test of time, and they are the hard, like, heavy hitters of the 80s, really. I know that obviously Terminator 2 came out in the 90s, but you can see what I mean, is that, I mean, as well, Alien came out in the 70s, well, 79, but yeah, and then, I mean, just a year later, after this, you have Die Hard, which is by the same director, John McTiernan, which is another fantastic action film, which we've also talked about on the podcast previously, so we obviously don't need to talk about it here, but it's worth mentioning that's another film that's quite similar in that its story is like its story is there, but its plot is kind of messy because obviously with that film you gave me the trivia that they were coming up with the story as it came along.
They rewrote a lot of that during filming. So,
but once again, like you watching both of those films, I feel like before you're told that it's directed by John McTiernan, the same guy, you don't consciously get it. But as soon as that's said, you're like, oh, that makes total sense, because both of these are fantastic in their own right. Like the shot composition of this film, for instance, like they filmed a lot of this in the jungle, of course. So they had to sort of mold like the trees around them to sort of get shots so that it's like, you know, let's cut some leaves here to get like a shot going through the tree to these people and all that. And there's just a lot of shots of people's faces in this film of like them looking really tense. But there's, you know, it's just the way the camera moves and that I mean, it's expertly done. And it's the same with Die Hard. You know, it's not like obviously John Wick has changed the way that people shoot action now. It's like the one take has become currently, as of recording this, the most trendy thing to do in both film and TV for action sequences.
Yeah.
Of course, there are some directors who use it for non-action sequences and sort of use it to build tension. You know, like Alfonso Cuarón, for instance, he doesn't really use it for tension, I don't think, but he uses it to sort of like to make everything feel bigger, like there's a world around these characters. But in these films, I mean, it's an example of that you can still have cuts in your action and cut between different shots, and it can look good. It just, you have to have a bit of artistry, you have to have a bit of intelligence, I guess. Because like there's like 3 edits when Mac picks up and fires the minigun that Jesse Ventura's Blaine is carrying. But because it flows well, and like it goes from a closer angle to a slightly wider one, and then to this big old wide shot where you can see him like gunning down the forest. And as well, like, you know, we're always following the 180-degree rule of like, we're gonna film from we're gonna film from the left, but on the right side of these characters, so we're all getting them in their right side profile, shooting at the forest. And then we're cutting back to the forest and seeing it explode. Like, I know we haven't really talked about the story yet, and we haven't really gotten into the nitty-gritty of this film, but I just, you know, I think it's worth mentioning that, I mean, it's a pretty good point to start off with. The scene that they kill the forest, they kill the jungle. That's one of the best indications of what kind of film this is, where it's just like, in that scene, like they're launching grenades, they're just firing all of their bullets into the fucking tree line. Because one of them started shooting, and so they all just start shooting, and it's wonderfully crude and blunt and stupid, and I think that's another thing about this film of like similar to Die Hard. I know I said that Die Hard is an intellectually made film because it is. It's a simple film made in a really smart way, and that's the same you could say about this film.
Because I'm not always familiar with the directors of all the films that I'm. Yeah, I'm obviously a big fan of Predator and Die Hard, but again, I always forget who directs those two. Yeah.
Well, you also probably forgot that because John McTiernan is in prison, I'm pretty sure.
Oh.
Yeah, he's been to prison at the very least. Yeah, I think he's still in prison. I think, and that's if he's still alive. Yeah, no, he's still alive. Yeah, he went to prison because he tried to bug a producer, like he tried to spy on a producer who he didn't agree with while making a film. and then he got caught, and then I think, well, that's the beginning. There's a whole story to it, but we don't have time to go into that. I just thought, I just wanted to note that, yeah, one of the reasons you probably haven't heard of him is because he's in prison, and he's not made a film since like 2006. So
that's unfortunate, but
it is. But unfortunately, you know, he did the crime. You know, it's the same thing that happened to Wesley Snipes. You know, at least Wesley Snipes is out though, and he's doing films again. So
no, the filmmaking in Predator, yes, is because it's not one. It's very distracting
it's subtle.
Yeah, because
it's subtle.
It's distracting with the acting and the action and the visuals. That you don't look at the camera work and stuff as much.
It's not like a flashy film where it's like, oh, look at our smooth camera work, or like look at our shot compositions. It's not like The Vitch, where, you know, it's in the 4:3 aspect ratio, and, you know, all these shots are sort of like very still and static, and sort of letting the characters move around in the scene. No, this film is like, okay, you guys, we can move the camera. We can move the camera. We can leave it still. We can have it pan. We can have it zoom in, and, like, you know, we can use the focus wheel. We can use the focus wheel. You know, it's like, it's again. It's just like that and Die Hard. They're the perfect example of, like, you can go anywhere with action, and you can do it to this sort of quality where it's like, it's competently done. It looks great in some circumstances, you know, some sequences. Sometimes the editing's a bit sort of, like, not choppy, but it's like a bit quick and disorienting. Yeah. But you can account for that as being like, oh, well, it's the heat of battle or whatever. And you totally get it. It's not distracting. It's just like, oh, there's a surprise.
And when you look at the camera work, especially because of it's this whole thing of they're being watched by the predator in the jungle, and then they're also on the lookout for what's in the jungle. The camera is used to play this perspective game where you get to see them looking into the jungle or shooting down the jungle, and then obviously the reaction shots of their faces to show the tensity, show the characters, show how the emotion and the fear and the panic. But it is a lot of just that perspective of them looking into the jungle, not being able to see this creature that's watching them. It plays into the whole, film basically. So
well, it's the I mean, first off, before we get into like the concept, and obviously we'll do like a brief synopsis of like, the few events that happened in the film, and obviously we should talk about the characters and stuff like that. But something that is worth noting is that this is a film where it's almost entirely shot during the day. I was wrong talking about it with you, I think, off the podcast, because I don't think we've mentioned that we were doing this yet.
Yeah.
In saying that, because we were talking about Mad Max at some point. Well, we were talking about the discussion was last time, but we were talking about Mad Max Fury Road in a different sort of context, and we were talking about how like the night scenes in that film. We spoke about this in the podcast as well, but we're talking about how the night scenes are all like blue and weird, and it's obvious that they shot during the day. In this film, there are actually plenty of circumstances. In fact, a third of the film is at nighttime.
Yeah.
As that last half an hour is just, Arnie versus the Predator at nighttime. Besides that, however, I think it would be remiss of me to not point it out. This entire film, for the most part, I guess it's like 2/3 of it, if we're being really accurate to the runtime, is entirely during the day. And you feel that sort of horror and sort of tension and that stress that the character and the anxiety that the characters are feeling the entire time.
Yeah.
That they are on the mission. It's again, I think it's a miracle that this film works as well as it does. That you can feel sort of scared and tense during the daytime. When obviously darkness is an element that pretty much almost everyone is scared of in some capacity, and yet again, we feel secure in the sunlight. We feel secure in daylight, and again, that kind of plays into the whole attribute of this film in that it's a bunch of burly action heroes from the 80s getting their asses kicked by something that's just completely out of their league,
Well, I was thinking just now what you could compare it to, because obviously the whole fact that it's obviously Arnold Schwarzenegger, and it's just like it starts off as like this, generic action movie.
Yeah, it's Commando.
Yeah,
it's a rip-off. Yeah,
and then it merges into like a horror, and almost a slash.
It's kind of like I've not seen from Dusk Till Dawn, but I know that film is one where it starts off, in the first half of that film is just like it's like a thief heist sort of like action movie.
Yeah.
And then it switches to a vampire movie halfway through. This does the exact same thing. The only hint we get that like the Predator is about, and that it is something alien, is in the beginning, where they show that shot of the Predator coming down to Earth. Now, some people say that they would rather that wasn't in the film, because it kind of, and I'm kind of inclined to agree, but I also don't mind it.
Yeah,
because the if you discovered it with the characters, that there is something alien that's come for them, that probably would be better. But I can understand why they did it. Because they want to set it up nice and early that this is not a typical situation.
Yeah. And it is it's only a short snippet really of that. And
if you're rewatching this, you could maybe be going to the bathroom or something, come back, and then you probably haven't, either you forget it or you haven't seen it just because you were getting some pizza or something in the next room with your family, or you. By the way, I definitely watch this with your family and your young kids. This would be a great one. All of the gore.
It's definitely not rated 18. I remember once around my dad's, probably I think it was, I saw it on the shelf, and he's like, "Well, what film you want to watch?" And I saw Predator, and I'm like, "What about that one? That looks weird." And he's like, "It's a bit you're a bit too young for that one." And I'm like, I've seen a lot of things when I was little, but apparently Predator was too much.
Which is kind of weird. I mean, it's a violent film, but it's not like on the level of other things I know you watched when you were little.
Yeah, it's not that bad. But
like, you see blood, but that's about it.
Yeah, I'm surprised it's it could definitely, like, you can see why it's an 18, but it's also not like a film that would necessarily have to be.
I mean, you see like a mannequin of Jesse Ventura at one point with like his chest opened up. That's about it. Like, and that's like in like the background of a scene.
But yeah, it's I was going to say how obviously you've got that merge of the action and the horror, which it is this weird thing where it's like obviously you got the goofy one-liners and a little bit of that stereotypical Arnold Schwarzenegger action. And then it really does merge into this whole different film.
Well, it feels very, very sort of wink at the camera with that. I think that was a self-aware move of this is what as you said, it's like it's like every other action film at that point. I think there are some bits that are, again, it's like this film is like endlessly quotable. Like, so I think it is in a different league to that, and it is played all very serious and straight. It's those few sort of like moments in between where the humor sort of comes through. Yeah. Like when Jesse Ventura says, "I ain't got time to bleed," and like the other guy goes, "Oh, okay then," and then he like awkwardly turns back to shooting. It's like bits like that, or the Shane Black jokes, which are terrible, but like they're kind of funny because they're not funny, and again, to address what you said about the action at the beginning, there is that infiltration scene. The story of this is that Arnie leads like a band of mercenaries. You have a whole bunch of them. Shane Black is one of them, who was the writer for this. He also wrote Lethal Weapon, and a ton of other stuff. And then he made The Predator, which again is a no-no. He fucked up, unfortunately. But this was back in premium, Shane Black time, where he was making things like Lethal Weapon, and it's like he was, he had that punchy sort of snappy dialogue. But with this, it's he's actually acting in the film. He's the first one to die. Out of the group, but they infiltrate. Basically, they're sent to go and get like these like dignitaries or something like this. Supposedly, like some sort of political situation where a helicopter has gone down, and there's a political sort of associate that they have to go grab and a few soldiers. But when they get there, it turns out that Carl Weathers, who is like an old friend of Arnie, who leads the group, he comes along, and it turns out that it's about a very different kind of mission. It's about like gathering intel. And so the mercs are like naturally quite angry, but once they've like blown the shit out of the base that they infiltrate, they capture a woman. And then that's when the Predator starts to take more of an active role in sort of like stalking them. But before that, they come across a previous mercenary group who seemingly just died on the spot while they shot in all directions. And the guys, they're all like investigating, and they're like, "Why the hell would they do that?" And then later on, they're shooting at the forest. It's like it's quite smart with the setup and payoff of that. But yeah, and then as time goes on, the Predator starts picking them off one by one like a slasher movie.
Yeah.
Until it's only Arnie and the Predator, and Arnie, he's lost all of his worldly weapons of like weapons of mass destruction, like the machine guns and the grenades and all that. He only has 2 grenades and his like knife, and so he starts going like full like Boy Scout, like full Rambo.
He becomes Tarzan at the end, and he's just...
Muddy Tarzan, yeah.
Yeah, they have that little face-off.
That's the general. That's the general gist of the thing. Yeah, the little face-off thing. Literally face-off. When the Predator takes his mask off, you're one ugly motherfucker.
But there's and then obviously there's the woman that he says just get to the chopper. So.
Yeah, rewatching that scene is always fantastic because it's that he kicks the gun out of her hand, turns around, and it just starts spraying, and it's just like. It's so like because I mean it's serious, but it's like because of his delivery of the line, like it's. I don't think you necessarily laugh at it, but you're like yeah, fuck yeah,
get to the chopper.
Yeah, it's so like I mean this is the best gay porno I've ever seen. This is what this film is. It's the most manly, muscle-bound film I think in existence.
I mean, yeah, it kicks off
like
with.
If you're a gay action fan, this is the best film for you, really. Even the Predator's showing off his pecs,
Yeah, it even kicks off with obviously the iconic Dylan and Arnie,
Yeah, and if you were if you're gonna like read a queer narrative into that, like that's super gay. The relationship between Mac and Blaine, that's super gay.
Arnie and the Predator, that's super gay.
Yeah, super gay. Yeah. The only thing that's not super gay is not Shane Black. The other regular guy. He doesn't really have like a homoerotic narrative. Shane Black, that's super gay because he's compensating. He's super gay, definitely. That's definitely how it is. Billy's super gay because he takes off his clothes to fight the Predator.
He just wants some one-on-one time with the Predator.
Yeah.
There's all that. But then also, I was just going to say about the whole... Obviously, it's a little bit slashery with the Predator going after them one by one, picking them off.
Oh, very, very.
Yeah. But I love to compare it to the fact it's obviously the mercenaries, our little mercenary group in this film, are like the group of teenagers that you'd get in a normal slasher film. Just it's vamped up, obviously, because the Predator is worse.
I mean, to be quite honest, Joe, I think compared to like comparing to like teenage slasher films, I think this still has more in common with Tropic Thunder. To be quite honest,
yeah.
I mean, they're in a jungle. They're paid professionals who came to do a job, but they're not going. They don't get the job done because another kind of film starts in place of it.
Mm-hmm.
They start getting picked off by the jungle, and then by the end they have to escape on a chopper.
Yeah, I mean, Tropic Thunder in itself is playing up the fact of films like Predator a little bit, isn't it? So
yeah,
obviously.
But in terms of I don't know, the slasher as a genre, yes, but I don't think the characters.
No, I wasn't. I'm just more saying it is a ramped up slasher. Is what I'm saying.
I agree, yeah. No, and obviously the Predator is straight up like... I mean, he's even wearing a mask like Jason Voorhees or something, So I agree with that. But yeah, I mean, it's more a case of like, each of these men could be like the action hero of their own film, but they're all going to be in this film, and then they're going to blow the fuck out of the bad guys, out of regular human people, and you can get an idea of how good they are. And then they have to go up against something that's otherworldly and completely different.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, besides, I guess like in terms of the characters, like Carl Weathers is really good in it. Like as his character Dylan. he has a really cool death. I think that's one of my favorites in the film, where his arm gets blown off, but he's got 2 MP5 machine guns in each hand.
Yeah.
And so he unravels the sling with it, and it's like the camera's turning with him as he like turns backwards, and he's like and he's like firing, and then he gets like stabbed by the Predator. It's so cool. So
there are a few gruesome deaths in the Predator. Does his best.
Most of it is just like a big flash of blood, though, and then we cut away. Again, like that Jesse Ventura thing, like the idea is that the special effect of like the laser is seen, and then the big splash of blood. But because the camera is above his torso, like it's just at the sort of it's like his shoulder level. You don't actually see the gore until they've obviously replaced it with a mannequin.
Yeah.
And I say they've replaced it with a mannequin because the way that the chest is sort of buried into, there's no way that could be Jesse Ventura.
They just ripped into his chest, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me.
He ain't got time to bleed.
He's got so much muscles that he's got the space for it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and then I will say this: there is something that kind of bugs me every time. This is a nitpick, by the way. This is not a criticism. When Arnie gets shot in the arm, the actual shot itself makes it look like he's been shot in the arm, but when you see it later, it's just grazed him. But the amount of blood and like laser effects that come out of him when that happens, you assume that a hole has been blown through his arm. But no, later on he's just like, it's like he's Wolverine and he's like done self-healing or whatever. Yeah, it's like.
I mean, how do you think he takes on the Predator? Yeah.
Well, I can suspend my disbelief for that sort of stuff because that's 80s action stuff. And Arnie's. By the way, I need to also say that although Arnold Schwarzenegger is not a good actor, I think he's fantastic in this film. He has the charisma to pull it off. Like at the beginning when he's in the helicopter and he's got the cigar and he's like got his feet up, he's so cool in this film. I mean, this is the thing: is that this film, as I said, it's the most manly film ever made, and all of the characters are ridiculously cool, but also kind of like cliche, and there's the wink wink of that. Like Billy's the strong silent type, but he gets told a pussy joke by Shane Black the second time and he starts laughing maniacally. Jesse Ventura's like taking himself way too seriously that everyone else is kind of like, what the hell's wrong with you? Arnie's really the only one that escapes it, but even then, like there's like bits where he holds his like machine gun with one hand and stuff. It's they're all firing from the hip and stuff. It's like I love it, but it definitely wouldn't work today.
No, it's very
making it.
It's very movie. A lot of it, obviously.
I will say it doesn't feel like a dated movie. I will say that, but it does feel like you couldn't make this film today
because it's not
with modern filmmaking.
No, because none of it, even the horror bits where it is the Predators picking them off. It's somewhat scary, and it does a very good job of making a tense sort of middle and late act of the film. This
film, however, I can't see anyone hating it. Like it's just this might win my favorite film of the season. It'll probably be Mad Max, to be quite honest.
But there's a couple of good ones that
but that's because
to pick between. So.
But I think this one is definitely in the top list of both of our lists. I think.
Yeah, even I'd put it top 3. So.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Is that like I think this one could. This one is one that resonates with both of us. This isn't like a you versus me or me versus you type situation like we've had in the past. This is just like we are two manly men bros who appreciate this awesome film.
Just having a manly handshake before watching Predator.
Manly handshake, and we're gay. Listen, it's a queer reading of our podcast, okay? It makes sense.
But no, I've never heard of anyone. It's probably more popular among male audiences. But I haven't heard of anyone that's not enjoyed Predator. But I think it's probably doesn't appeal as much to certain people as, Again,
I think it just depends on what you're going into these sorts of films like after. Again, like, I think from a modern perspective, sure, you don't have like you have one female character and she kind of has like the Barbara effect from like she's still more competent and she does more sort of like helpful things in the film, but she's definitely not as she's kind of a placeholder, really.
Yeah.
She's like a diversity hire, I think. Not in the respect that that's by the way, that's not a bad thing. I'm just saying that I think she was put there because it's like we need to have a bit of variety in the cast, not because she's a woman, but because like she's different to these like action hero guys. Like if you had just them as the existing characters, like. First off, you wouldn't get that world building of like the Predator is a thing in this part of the world, but also like you need that differing perspective as well. It's sort of a Assault on Precinct 13 factor where in that some of the prisoners fight alongside the cops to defend the precinct because all of their lives are in danger. So they all work together. This is a similar thing where they started off as enemies, but because they're in this survival situation, they all work together and they all decide that instead of running away, this is where I think like it does differ from like your traditional slasher like flick. This film, they don't decide to run away. They decide we're going to just stay here and kill it.
Yeah, the hunters become the hunted a little bit.
Yeah, so. Until obviously when they start losing, they have to bail.
And they have to get to the chopper. Yeah, it's difficult to really. It's simple but complex at the same time, and it just works. It's this weird merge of generic genres and characters and some cliches and stuff, and then it all merges together with this new alien threat premise that makes this quite intriguing but intense, little adventure, really.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, would you give it a score or?
It's difficult
because we're doing those at the moment,
yeah.
Joe. We have to keep it in mind, unfortunately.
The thing is, my scores.
I've set a dangerous trend, unfortunately.
No, the score thing. I could score films, and I could give it a completely different score on different occasions.
Yeah.
But Predator. I mean, it's up there. So I don't remember what I've given other things. But we'll give it an 8.5. Maybe it's verging.
That's
on
a good score
really,
from you. To be fair, that's a good score from you.
Well, it's Predator. I do love Predator. I've never always enjoyed Predator. It's a good one. So.
It's 10 out of 10 for me. I'm sorry, but like this is my argument. Have we actually talked about anything negative in this film?
I know. That's why I'm like, maybe I'll give it a 9 out of 10.
I rest my case.
I'll even bump it up to 9.
As I say, like, hey, this is the high diver. This is the high board. No, here's the thing: is that like, yeah, I'm gonna give this as a 10 out of 10. I gave a 9.5 or something. I think it's maybe a 9.3 or something to Mad Max Fury Road. I probably like Mad Max Fury Road more, but the thing is about the details is that when you start getting into like nitpicks and details, there are things I can pick out with Mad Max and go. Although, like, there are better executions of, like, action scenes in Mad Max, in my opinion, there are those things like the day for night is awful. It's not like film ruining, but compare it to this one where like nighttime looks so badass in this film. It looks great because they're not doing it at exactly nighttime. They're doing it sort of nighttime, and they have that natural lighting. They have like the mist and like side lights they can use.
I mean,
it looks great, and. I can't really find anything critically negative with it. It's not high art, obviously, but it's. We're talking about action films. This is big blockbuster summer season right now. This is 10 out of 10.
They don't make anything more complicated than it needs to be, while also making like a perfect just film, really. So.
I've just read, by the way, because I have them in front of me. I've got all 3 of the original Predator films, plus Die Hard in the corner, because I recently got a copy of Die Hard.
Yeah.
But I've had these Predator copies for like several years now. But I'm looking at the front of Predator 2, and it's like, I think it was 1990 was Predator 2. and it's the most like cheesy thing that you could have on the front of, because like Predator, the cover of Predator doesn't have any like quotes or like like, he's a hunter. This one, however, I'm gonna read you the sort of catchphrase that they've put on the front of Predator 2. Silent, invisible, invincible. He's in town with a few days to kill.
He's in town with a few days to kill is quite... Yeah, he's just popping into town for a couple of days, just gonna slaughter a few guys.
I've changed my mind. Predator 2 is the best film. No. All right, we gotta close now. Yeah. I've been Jack.
I've been Joe. Stick around for more podcasts later on.
Yeah. And thank you for checking out 2 More Takes. We'll see you next time.